All right, chapter 7 starts off with exploring quadratic relations. First thing you need to know is, what does a quadratic function look like? So here are some examples that I have on the left side here of quadratic equations. Y equals negative 3x squared plus 5, y equals 2 bracket x minus 1 bracket squared minus 1, and y equals x bracket x plus 5 minus 3. These all have something in common. Everything that they have in common is that they all have an x squared term. The first one is really easy to see. I have an x squared. The second one, if I multiplied the brackets out, would give me an x squared. And the third one, if I multiplied the x times the x, would give me an x squared. So quadratic functions all have x squared in common. They must have an x squared. If they don't have an x squared, they're not a quadratic equation. Okay, for the graphs of these things, most of the time we're going to be using our calculator. And on the TI-83, you have this button here, the y equals button. Press it. Clear anything you have there. And we're going to put in this equation here. So I have negative 3. Your x button looks like this. It should say x comma something something or something like that. So 3x squared. And then you just say plus 5. And then you hit the graph button. You might want to make sure that your window setting is from negative 10 to 10. And probably should be from negative 10. And if it's not right, you just type it in, press enter. And y max should be 10. And the scale should be 1. Then when you graph it, you can kind of see, okay, that's what it kind of looks like. Let's see, it goes through at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it goes up at 5. Other things, it goes through at, say, like almost negative 1 and positive 1. So here's 1 over here, 1 over here. It looks like it's a little bit bigger than that. So it goes through maybe here and here. Just sketching these so you get an idea of what they look like. Okay. Next one. Again, go your y equals button, clear it. Let's start again. So 2 bracket. I have x minus 1, so I use the x button again. X minus 1 bracket. Squared is outside the brackets. And then I have a minus 1. And again, hit the graph button. Okay. This time it looks like the graph has the low point there at 1 comma negative 1. So 1 comma negative 1 down there. And it looks like it goes through the origin and keeps on going up. Through there, and so on. Actually, maybe a little bit less. A good thing to do maybe is change your window settings so that it looks like your graph is fully in the window. Because it's so far up here, I don't need to the left and I don't need to the bottom much. So I can change the window and get used to changing your window settings as well. So let's make that maybe go from negative 4 maybe even. And the y minimum to negative 4. So I get a better idea of what the graph looks like. Okay, it doesn't quite go through the origin. It's a little bit up from that. So let's try those points again. A bit up from that and a bit up from that. Just so you get an idea of what the graph looks like. That's a very poorly drawn graph. Make sure they're kind of, if you have to draw them, make sure they're kind of look like a loop. Okay, and the last one. So again, y equals, clear it, put in my x, bracket, x plus 5, bracket, minus 3. Make sure it looks like exactly like what you have down there. And then graph it. See, this one's way off the graph, right? So a good thing to do sometimes if it's off and you don't want to change the window, click the zoom button and go to zoom standard all the way to 6, or you can just press 6 and press enter. And it'll change the graph to be negative 10 to 10, negative 10 to 10. So you get a really good idea what your graph looks like. So again, we're just sketching these, so it looks like it's almost down at the bottom and over in between 2.5. We're just sketching these, right? So all the way down the bottom, over between 2.5, and then it kind of goes up through over here and up through over there. The biggest thing with these quadratic graphs is that they're symmetrical. And symmetry means that they're the same. If I cut it down right down the middle, it's going to be like a mirror image across that line. So they're the same right across that line. And that line is actually called the axis of symmetry. Because it's an axis because it goes straight, vertical. It's symmetrical because it's the same on both sides. So axis of symmetry. So notice that the first graph has a negative sign in front. And it's in front of the x squared term. How does that correspond to what my graph's going to look like? Well, look, it's actually upside down, or what we would call upside down. Okay? The other two don't have negative signs, they just have positive signs, and therefore they're right side up. Okay, so the first one has a negative sign, therefore it's going to be upside down. So, does it open up, which is like this, or down, which is like this? And how do you tell? Well, if it opens up, it's got a positive x squared value. If it opens down, it's got a negative x squared value, so negative sign in front of the x squared. Does that mean, does it have a max or a min? This one, because it's got a minimum value, is actually a minimum. Okay? This one, because it opens down, it's actually got a maximum value. So make sure you understand that if it opens up, it has a smallest value, which is a minimum. If it opens down, it's got a biggest value, which is a maximum. So you'd think that, okay, it's positive, wouldn't I have a minimum? Or positive, wouldn't I have a maximum? No, it's actually minimum. Okay, because of the way it opens, and because it's got a lowest point. And that's basically how to tell how to graph them using a calculator, how to check to see if they're opening up or down, and kind of what the axis of symmetry represents.